Right, we shall begin. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to Syria Digital Lab, unlocking the potential of the Syrian digital space. My name is Malik Al-Abda. I'm the program manager for Iraq and Syria at the European Institute of Peace. More information about the EIP in the booklets in front of you. We're delighted to be here at Brussels 3, an excellent conference designed to help Syrians. And we hope this event will also help improve the lives of Syrians through the digital sphere. There's Arabic translation for whoever needs it. It's on channel 25. And English is on channel 2 for those who need speakers. If some of you would like to tweet, and I urge you all to tweet about this event, you can do so using hashtag Syria Digital Lab and also hashtag SyriaConf 2019, which is the hashtag for Brussels 3. Let me hand over to Hilda Hardeman, the head of the European Commission's Foreign Policy Instrument, FPI, without whose generous support this event would not have been possible. Hilda.
Good morning. Dear Marie, dear guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, as head of the European Commission Service for Foreign Policy Instruments, I'm delighted to welcome you to Brussels. And of course, a special word of welcome to those of you who have joined us from Syria and from the region. The European Union is very happy to support today's Digital Lab jointly with our colleagues from the German government. My thanks go also to the European Institute for Peace, who have put a tremendous effort into organizing this event. I think it's very fitting that this first event of the Days of Dialogue should be about digital tools, digital communication, about the digital space. The digital revolution offers challenges, but also unprecedented opportunities. It's having a significant impact on all aspects of our lives across the globe. It's also deeply affecting foreign policy. Federica Mogherini, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, has underlined many times that modern diplomacy should be participatory and digital. Innovative digital solutions should increasingly be deployed to help achieve the EU's foreign policy objectives. And as head of the European Commission's Service for Foreign Policy Instrument, a service that reports directly to Federica Mogherini, my task is to help turn EU foreign policy into action. And that is precisely what we want to do today in a very concrete way. With today's event, we want to help unlock the potential of the Syrian digital space. With today's event, we want to see how the opportunities of the digital space can be used to help contribute in many different meaningful ways to achieving an inclusive, lasting resolution of the conflict in Syria in all its aspects. We want to reflect on how the possibilities of the digital space can be turned to the advantage of Syria, to the advantage of every single person, every single organization in this room and beyond. There's no limit to the scope. Digital approaches can be used to save lives in emergency situations. This is one of the applications we will learn about today. Digital tools also allow to engage with communities that would otherwise remain isolated, to build bridges. We will hear today about Techfugees, a website run by millennials for millennials that brings young refugees together across borders. And digital approaches are, of course, crucial for the economy. We will hear today from different startups and entrepreneurs. But there is more. Digital applications can also be used to ensure accountability and to support justice. Sharing electronically evidence of criminal acts might turn out to be particularly relevant to achieving accountability in Syria. We should try, for example, to apply advanced technologies and digital tools to support the families of missing persons in Syria. Dear guests, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, let us explore in the time ahead of us how we can make the most of the opportunities of the digital space to help ensure the continued dynamism of Syrian civil society, to help Syrians remain connected across borders and across the divisions that result from 8 years of conflict. Let us explore what the digital space can bring for Syrian media, Syrian education, Syrian startups, for a whole host of initiatives in Syria and beyond, in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt. And let us see what the digital space can help achieve when it comes to bringing justice. Now, let us be practical in doing so. We need to look for outcomes that work in real life. Thinking up approaches on the ground, thinking up approaches that work on the ground requires experimentation. It requires entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. And I'm pleased to see many of you in the panel and in the audience today. We look forward to hearing about your experiments, your experiences about practical ways forward that help real people on the ground. We look forward to being inspired. I wish you a fruitful discussion. I thank you all for being here, and let's get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. Now, let me explain a little bit how we got here, how we got to the point where we have this event called Syria Digital Lab, and what we want to do with Syria Digital Lab going into the future. So first, let me go back to the past. Roughly around a year ago, as part of my EIP job description, I brought together Syrian journalists. I mean, I'm a former journalist myself, so I'm kind of interested in this field. And I wanted to tackle the issue of incitement, which is a big problem, often overlooked in the Syrian war, the level of incitement in the Syrian media, on all sides. So we started an initiative bringing together Syrian journalists from across the political divide, those from Syrian government areas, opposition, and SDF-controlled areas. And there were a few surprises that I didn't expect. One, they were very nice to each other, despite the obvious political differences. The other thing is that I sensed there was a real desire on the part of these journalists to actually work together. A lot of them exchanged numbers, because a lot of them just didn't know what was happening on the other side. Some of them, for example, were based in Damascus. They didn't know what was happening in Eastern Ghouta, like 2 or 3 miles away. So I sensed there was a willingness to cooperate and work together. But how was this to happen? Physical access is actually very difficult. And you can get into serious trouble if you're seen to be talking to someone on the other side. So obviously the space where these people can come together is the digital space. This is the space which hasn't been completely controlled by the various belligerents. So I started thinking, how can I build on the kind of rapport and the kind of cooperative spirit between these journalists to build a project that brings them together and that makes them work together on a daily basis, in the hope, of course, of developing a new narrative, a post-war narrative, if you like. So I was thinking, right, initially I thought in a very conventional way. What do? I set up a project, let's say some kind of digital website that helps to bring people together. I go to a donor and say, I pitch the idea and get money and then implement the project. That's the kind of conventional, traditional way. But I've been there before. You know, at one point in a previous life, I actually ran a TV station. The problem is, any media project that relies solely on donor money is very vulnerable to changes of priorities, changes of agendas. So that's not going to work. We have to think of something else, a new model that builds in sustainability from day one. And then I realized, hold on a second, this doesn't apply just to the media space. This applies to anything to do with the digital space. This needs to happen, this needs to be built in from day one. And of course, the range of digital interventions is very wide indeed. So then I started speaking to some of my colleagues, and I said, listen, we need to look at this digital space thing. This could be really promising as an area for bringing Syrians together and working together. Now, I have a confession to make, which is I'm not really a techie at all. There's a running joke that I'm struggling to use Google Docs, for example. So I understand a thing or two about conflicts, and I've been in conflict zones, and maybe understand a little bit about the politics, but for real technical expertise, I needed to bring people in. Now, I was very lucky to bring two fantastic women into this project who really put, let's say, the meat on the bone. One is Emma Beals, who's over there, and the other is Rama Shakaki. We'll start with Emma, who will, let's say, set the scene in terms of what is the status of the Syrian digital space right now. Now, before I hand over to Emma, I just want to say one last thing, that this event is really a conversation. Hence, this is why we call it a lab. The idea is to get different elements. So there's going to be a lot of speakers, a lot of presentations. I hope you'll find this stimulating. The idea really is to inform. So when you come away from this meeting, you'll have a much better idea about the state of the Syrian digital space. The other idea is also to inspire. And there are really inspirational stories in some of the presentations that you're going to see. But also, and I think as importantly, is some of the practical things. We want you to walk away from this event thinking, right, that person who set up a .com and is now a millionaire it's a really inspirational story. He's created hundreds of jobs for Syrians. But actually, there's something that I could incorporate into whatever civil society organization I run or humanitarian project that I'm doing that could be really useful and could really drive innovation and make what I do much more efficient. I'll stop there. Emma?
Hi. So the digital space is synonymous with the situation in Syria, has been since day one. The two things are pretty interlinked in the way that we think about things. The size of the space, the ways it's used, and who has used it has expanded rapidly since 2011. Access to the digital space has changed with the contours of the war through Syria-specific terrain like the shifting territorial control and the workarounds that came with that in order to be able to access the internet, to what's happening in neighboring countries, so Turkey's investment in 4G, for example, and then developments that we all share, like the Signal app or the advances in satellite imagery. 8 years has felt like a long time in Syria, but it's a long time in tech too. Many of you, from governments to UN agencies, NGOs, civil society, and accountability organizations have been using technology in different ways throughout the conflict, from mapping and visualization, aid monitoring software, to informal and formal information sharing mechanisms for refugees on their journey to safety. As well as the opportunities you'll hear about today, Syria's digital space has risks for all actors in the room as well. Syrians, peace builders and CSOs, humanitarians, entrepreneurs, and diplomats, cybersecurity, access to ongoing funding and the cost of accessing the internet, and more. We hope to talk about all of these with you in the coming weeks and months through the lab. We've done some initial research into these things, but you're all starting a very intense sort of 3 days. So we're going to send out a longer research report to you in the coming weeks. So make sure that you give us your email address, DM us on Twitter, sign up through the website so that we can keep in touch with you and make sure that you get all of that information in the coming weeks. But for now, what I wanted to do is just give you a couple of points to consider that are focused on why we're here today at Brussels 3, that I hope will be useful to you in your work today, tomorrow, next week, and so you can use them to think about how you're doing your own work while you continue with the conversations this week. We all want to engage Syrians in our work better. So whether you're in the office of the Special Envoy and you want to make sure as many Syrians as possible are involved in the peace process and can engage in your work, or if you're providing opportunities to women in Idlib and Jordan, all of these efforts rely on engaging with Syrians effectively, no matter where they're based. We've done some audience research and looked at how Syrians are using the internet. The vast majority, no matter where they're based, are using the internet on smartphones. Some of them are doing it right now in this room. About 2/3 of people in Syria have an internet-capable phone, and outside in the neighboring countries, those rates are pretty much consistent. Laptop use is far, far lower. On those smartphones, they're messaging. So in Syria, 87%, in Lebanon, 84% of people are using those phones to chat on WhatsApp, on Viber, on Signal, Telegram, to talk to their friends and family. They're using those messaging services more than anything else. Checking emails, not happening. And most of those people are using Facebook. So 80% of people are using, after chatting, they're using it to access social media, and Facebook is the go-to place within social media that people are using, far greater than Instagram or Twitter. If you want to talk to the people in this room, use Twitter. If you want to talk to Syrians, use Facebook, use WhatsApp. So Facebook is the go-to place for news. Arabic language pages are the most popular follows, hardly surprising. High engagement with material that's not directly conflict related, like all of us. And word of mouth and suggested follows are what drives engagement. None of this seems very far out, right? But you might be surprised. So I wanted to quickly talk about how this translates to our work, the work of the people in this room, which is important work that we want people to know about. So a few top tips for peace builders, if you're trying to get people engaged with what you're doing. Mobile optimization. Someone can access your website on their mobile phone, they can't see your website. So make it mobile optimized. WhatsApp or Telegram shareables. People message each other more than anything else. If you want people to engage with your content, take your content to what people are using, rather than expecting them to come to you. Facebook is king, in particular for news and information. Twitter is not. As I said, if you want to talk to the people in this room, you use Twitter. If you want to talk to Syrians, you use Facebook. Arabic language, probably don't need to explain it, but you might be surprised. And content or pages that people will share. Again, everyone is the same on the internet. We like posts about food and the weather, the price of gas at the local market, or pictures of cats. Is there a cat that looks like your policy proposal? Perhaps that's a way to get people engaged with it. So what else? The digital world isn't just about posts. Syrians are spread across the world. There's 1 million in the EU, 5.5 in the MENA region, another 6 million displaced in the country. Many of the future issues for Syria need an equality of access and approach that only the digital space can offer. Housing, land and property documentation, access to reliable information, including information about returns, social reconstruction, potentially elections, and livelihood opportunities, being able to have work opportunities, opportunities to start businesses. Currently, many of these are hampered by the fact that they require physical documentation or access. But there's people out there doing small projects. You're going to hear about a whole bunch of them a little later in the program. Surbanism is doing lots of stuff with the HLP space online. We found some local projects sharing sort of Article 19 decisions on Facebook and on Telegram. So taking the information people need into the platforms that they're using. And Schiffer couldn't be with us today, but we were hoping that they were. It's a small app addressing the access to documentation. So it's a little like Uber, you get your documents. It's run by a young Syrian startup and helping to get that people access to the important information that they need about themselves to continue to move forward with their lives. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rama, who's going to take you forward. She's a Syrian-American tech social entrepreneur and angel investor, and she will explain what that is and a little about how entrepreneurship can help develop some of these projects.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A decade ago, the Middle East found entrepreneurship as a way to address their huge unemployment challenge. And with that, they invested heavily in the startup ecosystem. What led was the growth of an investment landscape that would address the challenges, the funding challenges of entrepreneurs from the very early stages all the way to sale and exit. The lion's share of investment went to the digital entrepreneurs who took their ideas and grew them to million-dollar companies. And by far, the most successful entrepreneur among them was Ronaldo Mshahwar, a Syrian who sold his company, Souk.com, to Amazon for a near $1 billion valuation. So what were the key success factors to Ronaldo and other entrepreneurs like him? To begin with, it was raw talent, technical knowledge, tenacity, drive, and a sheer will to succeed. Number two was having an ecosystem that was supportive of them, mentors, business plan competitions, business accelerators, and incubators. And number three, and the most important, was an investment community that supported them from the very beginning all the way to their exit, particularly in an area that we call the Valley of Death, where most entrepreneurship ideas die because of the lack of funding. Here, angel investors come in. They're called angels because they take a high risk, but then mentor the entrepreneurs through the growth and eventually reap the rewards themselves. So while Syria was experiencing the conflict, this ecosystem was building in neighboring countries around them. And many of the Syrian entrepreneurs who left Syria found themselves in this ecosystem. A few of them succeeded with flying colors, but most of them had unique challenges that were born out of being in Syria. Chief among them was access to mentorship and access to funding. So why are we talking about the digital space? From some of the previous talks, you've heard bits and bytes, but the most important thing is embedded in the technologies in the tech space are, number one, security, something that's genuinely needed in the conflict where a lot of the entrepreneurs and the beneficiaries find themselves in vulnerable spaces. Second is speed. To be able to educate so many young people in such a rapid amount of time requires that speed. Third, scale. To be able to address 5 million, 9 million refugees is something only technology can help. And by far the most important part is stability. When you're looking at such a widely dispersed population, being able to bring them together in a virtual space is key to their future economy and stability. So we're seeing online classrooms bringing together Syrians from different conflict zones. While they're divided on the ground, they're joining together online and in peaceful cohesion. We ran a virtual business incubator. We had thousands of Syrian applicants. 100 at a time would attend this incubator and graduate startups. And those who weren't graduating startups were getting employment with companies who were mentoring them. And this is a borderless economy. So while TechFugees is running their conferences in France, the entrepreneurs that they're nurturing are fueling the economies of the host countries that they're in through their global customers. So what remains missing? Well, the donor organizations have put in a lot of funding into this landscape, but the Syrian business community is nowhere to be found, especially at the early investment stages. So imagine if we brought together the Syrian business community, men and women in the diaspora, and had them join forces in a public-private partnership with the donor organizations and the larger ecosystems to carry these entrepreneurs through the valley of death and help them go to their next funding stages. Young people like Ibrahim, who has a medical technology application, can partner with organizations like OSAM and SAMS, who already have access to a lot of data about the refugees that he can benefit from. They have the medical doctors who can mentor him, and a lot of them can become investors in his startup, and everyone would benefit. A young man like Ahmed, who single-handedly rallied 700,000 Syrians globally on his online platform, who help newcomers into the communities they're in find jobs, find housing, and get an education. If he had investors by his side, he could accelerate the growth of his startup and become perhaps like the next LinkedIn or Craigslist. So with that, I'd like us to go to the next panel and explore what this collaboration may look like. Hear people from the ecosystem tell us what the challenges and the opportunities are, and hopefully help us find solutions. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Helen Holmes-Pedersen, the advisor to the European External Affairs Service Secretary General on digitization. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen.
This is a big stage for me all alone. Could I ask the rest of the panel to come up, please? So I don't sit up here all by myself. That would be sad. Great. Thank you very much. I might start briefly by introducing myself with a little bit of a less European technical term, just simply to say that I started my professional life in the International Red Cross, Red Crescent movement on the ground in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war in the 1990s. That, first of all, tells you a little bit about how old I am, but it also gives you a sense of the empathy I have for a lot of the problems that Syrians face today as a result of what's going on in their country, your country. And then by many winding roads, via the UN, via the OECD, via others, I ended up in the EU's diplomatic service, which was what was captured in that fancy title that Rauma just described, where I now advise on digital diplomacy and run the secretariat of Federica Mogherini's Global Tech Panel. And that tech panel is an interesting initiative for conversation, because the idea was that in order to try to take on some of the great global problems of our time and address some of the challenges that come along with the digital revolution, we need to have direct conversations between technology leaders and political leaders, diplomatic leaders, because only when we talk directly to each other and not past each other can we actually start to get around to asking the right questions and possibly steering towards some of the right answers in the process. But before going along and introducing the panel, I'd actually really like to get a sense of who you all are. Who have we got in this room? So could I ask by a raise of hand, how many of you are entrepreneurs or business people? Ah, great, fantastic. How many of you represent governments from different places around the world, and that includes international organizations, governmental organizations? Okay. And finally, how many of you are Syrians? Excellent. Well, welcome to all of you, and welcome in particular to our Syrian friends, because this is meant to be for and about you, but above all, to be useful to you. So that's, in fact, the challenge to my panelists and to the next panel coming up. I'd like you to think about who we've got here in the room and pitch to the Syrians in this room, because that is who we're here for. So, and that's, in fact, the idea. The idea is to begin to have a first conversation. We don't get to choose the times we live in, but we can choose to do things to shape our times. And sometimes that just means, frankly, surviving, moving on, getting through. Sometimes it's doing something that can help other people. And sometimes there are those, as Ram was saying, these what-if moments where you get this idea of thinking, what if I could fix this? And what if technology could help me get there? And what if I could just make that alliance with money or people who'd already done it before and take it forward? So I'm actually very excited to to be here myself, to learn today, because I think we have, on the two panels we've got some great experiences. We've got, on the first panel here, some speakers who are going to help illustrate how those who have already succeeded in the digital space, one way or the other, can reach back in and help others and lift others. And perhaps also a couple of words of caution about what that requires of an ecosystem. But some of the ingredients of things that have already worked and that could work again, and that we can help make work if we can join forces. So for this first panel, that's where we come from. The second panel, I'm also really looking forward to, to give some examples of concrete initiatives that are out there, which will help you see and help this narrative come alive of how we can create solutions. We've got some great solution makers here, so I'm looking forward to hearing from them. And I'm hoping to hear from you, because I get a feeling that in this room we have a lot of expertise. So the rule of the game here is the speakers up here and the next panel speaking for the microphone get 2 minutes each, which is very techie. You've got 2 minutes to pitch. And for everybody else, we'll do a Q&A at the end. But if you've got something that is just on your mind and where you feel you want to jump into the conversation right away, raise your hand. And somehow, our lovely technician Pascal will find a way to switch on your microphone. And try to stick with a short, snappy intervention too, so we can make room for as much as possible. So there we are. So for the first panel, let me start by introducing Ahmad Sofyan Bayram, who is the Middle East and Africa Regional Manager at Techstars. He's also a Juso Entrepreneurship Program Manager and an advisor on the Techfugees Board and an entrepreneur in residence at Alik Sadi. And he's got a fountain of experience to draw from in the startup community world. So with this, Ahmad, the floor is yours.
Working? Now it's working. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here. Sorry for my voice. I got flu in the morning, but now I have a German accent, which is perfect. So good morning, everyone. So it's very important to have these conversations talking about the Syrian entrepreneur refugees. Through the past couple of years, a lot of conversation was talking about how refugees, entrepreneurs, they flee out of Syria, but we are missing very important stories here. Where are the Syrian entrepreneurs actually flee off? Since the start of 2011, more than 70% of the business and entrepreneurs in Syria flee the country, going to different places. They went out to Egypt, they went to Cairo, they went to Turkey, and the European. Syrian refugees, just like any Syrian entrepreneurs, they actually left to those countries with an ambition to restart over again and building a new life and ambitions. These ambitions gathered a lot of people. Should move here. All right, awesome. That's perfect. All right. Moving in these ambitions to have this change of the life and create over. That emotions help Syrian entrepreneurs turn off cities like 6th of October into what they call it now, Little Damascus, just comparison for Little China. Getting over again to some of places like Zaatari camps, where there's more than 3,000 Syrian entrepreneurs now operating in the countries, where more than 4,500 Syrian entrepreneurs working on Zaatari camps to recreate this temporary place as a camp into more industrial and innovational place for them to survive. So I get the chance to work with a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs in the past couple of years, where I put those experience and a viewing of the entrepreneurs, the challenges they are facing into a book that experience this with them. So I'm happy to have these conversations and talk more deeply about this insight with you guys. Thank you.
Passing the floor next to Hoda Salman, who is the team leader at the UK Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's funded social enterprise pilot project in Lebanon. Hoda is focused on micro and SME finance and impact investment, social entrepreneurship. If I've understood you correctly, Hoda, you are going to also look at some of the challenges that come with success or getting to success. So floor is yours. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here among Syrian friends and non-Syrian friends. As Hélène mentioned, I was, actually, small correction, I was leading the pilot program for the social enterprise pilot program in Lebanon. The pilot program successfully completed. And the idea was to support social enterprises and develop the ecosystem for social entrepreneurship in Lebanon. I wanted to also bring, and we'll come to this later on, to talk a bit more about the tech ecosystem in Lebanon, and for me, sort of my personal, in a way, passion is to how to integrate tech with good, and this is where I believe social enterprises play a significant role. Social enterprises that bring sort of strengths of civil society organizations with private sector sort of discipline and innovation, and therefore contribute to socioeconomic growth through a social entrepreneurship model. My background also is in impact investing, and this is a space where I see a huge potential in the Middle East, and particularly to help solve some of the current issues, whether social or economic, in the region, and particularly for Syrians in the region, in Syria and in host countries also in Lebanon. So I'll talk more about these points in the questions and answer.
Moving on to Rama, who among the business tech community in Syria should need no introduction. Can we have the back on again? Thank you. Goodness, even I need to wave my hand at the interpreter somewhere up there.
You have to turn the first one off.
Yeah, but how do you turn it off?
Yeah. Excellent.
It's not turning off.
Okay.
This one.
This is great. Okay, but I will just speak loudly and hope you can all hear me. As I said, Rama needs no introduction to the tech and Syrian business community. They can't hear me in the cabines. Okay, now we're good. And in a third time, I will say the Syrian tech and business community because of what she has been doing, running a venture philanthropy fund, angel investor, which I'm sure she'll tell us a bit more about, has made great headlines in the context of Forbes and a number of other well-renowned international listings of important women, business people, Syrians, and Rama also now is on the board of a Syrian International Business Association. So, Rama, I will let you say a bit more about what's on your mind, speaking to this audience, following up.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure being a Syrian to find myself in a room full of Syrians and people who want to support the development of our next generation and hopefully future economy in the diaspora. I'm most passionate about technology and its use for good, and we find ourselves in a place where we have to use technology for the benefit of Syrian youth. I'm haunted by the challenges, the mounting challenges, and how we haven't been able yet to rally our Syrian business community behind this cause. And I'm hoping that through this dialogue and this space, we can find, all of you can go to your respective communities and encourage the Syrian business women and men in your communities to join forces with civil society and the entrepreneurs that are doing a fantastic job and help accelerate this growth. Thank you.
Excellent. So I hear the first call for action, which is in many ways for those in the diaspora or locally who have capital, interest, knowledge, to be willing to reach back in and lift others up with them. And I think Rama, what she's saying is she can be one of the matchmakers, but I think I also expect that in the room there are people who can make matches themselves, who can look at what are bright ideas that might need to find capital, and people who might have the capital to help get things off the ground. Now, can I just come back to your valley of death, Rama, where you mentioned that in your introductory speech, and I think a lot of people who are out there with the bright idea or the I wish I could make this work or what if I could have such a difficult time getting from the back of the garage with a laptop or a smartphone to something that is actually viable and to the first 5 employees. Have you got thoughts on the valley of death for people here that they might be able to take home or do something about?
Yeah, thank you. So I think a lot of the players within civil society who are thinking to themselves, as donor funding is shrinking, where do we go, what do we do? Gearing their focus towards the entrepreneurship, especially the tech entrepreneurship landscape, and seeing how they can partner with these entrepreneurs, offer them up their data, offer them up some of their volunteers, and collaborate to take their startups to the next level. This is a natural win-win situation. The other is with the business community or the donor community to kind of encourage the Syrian businesses to come in and play a role in the digital space, and with the Syrian business community to look a little bit outside of the box. The factories have been demolished, unfortunately. Here's a new space that is very easy to enter, very easy to collaborate in and mobilize through.
Before I direct a few more questions, I wanted just to check in the room. Is there anybody who's got a burning question they'd like to jump in with now or a reaction? Yeah, over here on the left, my left.
The question is, do you have a plan to have this bridge over the valley of death, to have those ideas come through? There are so many ideas, so many communities in so many places. I have witnessed a number of areas or places where, or people who have drowned in the valley of death. There is a need for a bridge. Do you have an idea about how to build this bridge?
Of this valley of death, and what are the solutions that we're looking at? And chief among them is rallying the Syrian business community in an angel investment network that will bring them all together and partner with the ecosystem that already exists of incubators and accelerators to find these entrepreneurs and then start seeding them with investments, be it in Europe or the United States.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Father Alexei. I am the Director General of GOPA DERD. GOPA is the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch and all the East, and DERD is the Department of Ecumenical Relations and Development. DERD is the charitable arm of the Church. We are the largest faith-based organization in Syria with more than 40 centers and 1,700 staff members, full and part-time. We are operating in all governorates in Syria and have the most access all over Syria in cities and rural areas. We had a very good experience with UNHCR, with this system entrepreneurship. So we tried to reach out to the businessmen in Syria some 2-3 years ago who, based in Damascus and other governorates in Syria, who wanted to continue their presence and their work in Syria, not to get out of the borders. So therefore, I think when Ahmed can achieve with, in certain area, the possibility to get to the people in need and to refer them to business people to find job, I think GOPA DERD has much better chance because of our distribution over Syria to do this. So even UNHCR reached out to us this year to have call center with us to give the people the chance really to find jobs and so on. In addition, we have a job center in Damascus in which we can help refugees, IDPs, returnees to get jobs and to find their tomorrow better. So please, if you would like to cooperate with us, we are ready to do this and to be a part of this system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That, I think, was an extremely useful, helpful weighing in and giving back contribution. And it makes me think about, and maybe I can bounce that over to Hoda and to Salman, that one of the extraordinary things about digital technologies and tech business is this ability to work from wherever you are, even if that's not where your business necessarily is. and this is a different way of reaching back into the community. And maybe, Ahmed, do you want to do you have any thoughts on the individual entrepreneurialism that comes with working from where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. You're so correct into this. But before we go deeper into this, I want to also clarify one of the most misunderstanding about the Syrian refugees entrepreneurs. So usually government organizations tend to think Syrian refugees entrepreneurs is a one person living in one place, which is not true. Through the past of 8 years of my work with hundreds of Syrian entrepreneurs, I get to realizations that we can divide the Syrian entrepreneurs refugees into 3 main categories. First one, refugees based in camps, which is count to 10% of the community. They have a certain limitations, certain access of movement in some areas. They don't be able to sometimes leave the refugee camp where I based in. So it's an example of Zaatari. Second group, which is Syrians with means, which is the most common knowledge of recognition of governments. They get to the much support as when moving in, they move with them all of their assets, their past experience. They tend to work in the industrial manufactories projects, so that's why it's appeal for the government to attract those people. But they make very short percentage, which is 6% of the total refugees. The majority of Syrian refugees entrepreneurs are actually based on urban cities. Some of them with residency cards, some of them they still students, so they're working on student residency. Or maybe in a working permit. This 80% of the people are actually distributed all among the places they're working on in innovational sectors because of their sometimes limitation of travels. So being based, for example, in Beirut can help them establish a company, establish a platform, and website can help them sell in Dubai or sell to Europe. And we see this are examples. So understanding the typographics of Syrian entrepreneurs can help us to realize how this can actually supporting them and what their narrow that we can take to solve the challenges they are into.
Yeah, we got it. Up here in the back, please, over here.
I have a negative question, but I want to be honest with you. Are we overstating the facts here by having some wishful thinking that some technology will solve a conflict that needs initially and inherently political solution and political will on the table before we talk about tools? Thank you.
So Thank you. I don't think we're saying we're going to solve the conflict. We're saying we're going to try and support a segment of the population that is impacted by the conflict. This segment happens to have the highest potential in future stability. So if we're looking at supporting digital entrepreneurs who are looking forward in a world that is going digital, we are giving ourselves a better opportunity, A, to stabilize the Syrian community in the diaspora, and then B, to have a positive impact on the Syrian community within Syria.
I want to jump in very quick just to answer your question as well. So Syrian entrepreneurs, they not really think about, if you met them, they are really aware about the problems they are facing. They really understand what the challenges they have been to. So the problems they're trying to solve is actually related to the conflict, related to themselves. So with a lot of startups that you meet, you don't see people working on creating dating apps or gaming apps. They're working to solve critical problems as education, how people that they've never been into school now can have access more into educations. The example of Schiffer that we heard of before is that's just a way of being Syrian. It's really hard for me to obtain a document and then send them where very small time is needed and very important documents that have been sent to universities. So people like start to collaborate and help each other to solve the problems. Another startup famously based in Jordan called Sharqi Shop. Because of the war and what happening in Syria, a lot of artisans, they moved to the country, so they don't have a platform to sell their products. So this industry is about to die. So those guys start to help building a platform in e-commerce for those artisans to find a way to sell and start re-innovate this important industry. So the problems that people are trying to solve is not related to the conflict, but seriously related and very connected.
Yes, I also want to say that when you look at some of what the Syrian entrepreneurs, or even, let's say, in Lebanon's case, Lebanese entrepreneurs who are trying to support Syrian refugees, what they're trying to do, they see a big risk that a lot of Syrians are falling behind when it comes to digital skills and employability, and there's a big segment of youth who could actually miss out on the sort of the the new world as such, the new digital world. And so there's a big focus now, there's a large focus on upskilling and training youth, whether Syrians themselves or even host communities, to try and bridge that gap. Otherwise, there's a real risk that when the conflict ends, and hopefully will end soon, that when it ends, that they're actually going to go back, but there's going to be very little opportunities for them, or at least they will have the opportunity to really contribute to the economic growth of their home country.
Can I suggest perhaps, because this weighs nicely into our second group of panelists, and then maybe I'll collect the questions at the end, again, to keep going in this conversation, because I think what you're basically saying here, that this is about empowering individuals to feel like they can be part of a solution at a level they can operate. Not everybody can necessarily take on the big geopolitical questions. Wouldn't we wish it were the case? But meanwhile, you can do something. Maybe just keeping yourself and your family supported is actually something that we shouldn't underestimate the importance of. It's empowerment, and it's maybe sometimes finding solutions for something that's bigger than just yourself. And for that point of view, I'd really like to welcome in order the next panelists we've got, or the next speakers we've got, because they are solution makers. And I think hearing their stories might help bring that narrative to life. May I start with Moshanat Gashem, who is the CEO and co-founder at KeyCash, which solves cash payments in emerging markets. He's also a co-founder of Shopco, which is a platform in the MENA region that allows unexperienced merchants with no technical background to create their own online stores with no programming headaches and no struggles. This is the what if. What if I could do this? What if I could sell this? And then somebody helping to bring that solution to the question. So may I welcome first up Mohammed, please.
Yeah. Thank you. A bit of background about me. I started. All right. I started. Can you hear me? Cool. I started a few companies before, but my last company was Shopco, and on a personal level, it was quite transformational. I had to go through a lot of challenges and changes that I had to adapt with. I'll give a few examples. For example, I had to pitch to new investors. I had to be accountable. All of us Syrians are used to run companies on our own. We don't have bosses. We're our own boss. In the case of pitching to investors, we need to be accountable to the investor, to the employees, to any other stakeholder. It was for me, personally, it was a battle against the dictator inside me. I think we all have little dictators inside us in Syria. But it made me realize how different I became when I moved through this process. And right now we're quite scattered as a society. We might be depressed, but I think there's something we're not looking at. In the case of anger, we can either choose to become depressed or basically channel it to become an energy. If we're in Europe, for example, Syrians, we have access to banking system, something we don't have in Syria, but we need to realize this opportunity. Something on a personal level that really helped me quite significantly, that I had access to talent, to people I can learn from. But in order to do that, we need to enhance our soft skills. We need to realize that we need to adapt the prerequisites to a human being, something we used to make jokes about. And we need to be part of the digital world rather than to make us a pity case. Two things that basically I'm working on, a podcast with people who really helped, and a course to help people to build softwares like the one I built with no technical background. Thank you.
Excellent. Can I bring up next John Yeager, who's the founder of Hala Systems, based in the United States. Hala Systems is a social enterprise developing advanced solutions for civilian and asset protection, accountability, and prevention of violence. This all sounds very impressive, but no? You switch places? Well, okay. See, this is what happens when I can't read what's behind me. Technology to the rescue. Right, let me instead welcome Tamim. Aynan, project coordinator at Nation News London, urban practitioner based in London. He runs Mapping for Syria, which is a crowdsourced mapping project that engages Syrians in mapping the country. Very interesting case of empowerment, of basically letting people take back control over something that matters deeply to them right now and in the future.
Thank you very much. Okay, good. It's not working? Okay. We all know that housing, lands, and property rights in Syria are one of the most violated rights right now. After 7 years of destruction, demolitions, and forced evictions, and the discriminatory legislation framework led by the Syrian government, which give it the upper hand in controlling these lands. Maps for Syria is an initiative to tackle this issue using digitized maps. It's an online crowdsourcing platform that allows people to go online and start claiming their property rights just by logging in. But why maps? Because mapping is easy. I'm forgetting this. Because mapping is easy. It only needs you to log in and start clicking. By 3 clicks, you can map a building, and that's it. And second, because people are allowed, or they can share their memory of information and link it to their neighborhoods and properties, which will result in an interactive visual forum that will give lots of information about this location. In our first pilot mapathon, we started mapping the city of Daraya, in which we have gathered around 20 people for 2 hours and mapped around 1,300 houses. These houses are given names like either partially damaged, which we can call it tags, or partially damaged, or ruined, or still standing buildings. So can you imagine what can we do with more than this amount of people, with millions of Syrian diaspora inside and people inside Syria in a week or a year? Thank you very much.
Right. Next, may I welcome Makaz Madani, founder. See, maybe I should put on my glasses. Old technology. Founder of Arageek out of London, an independent online platform focusing on reporting the latest digital innovations in pop culture and trends to Arab millennials. This is reaching out to youth. Go for it.
Thank you. So my name is Malaz Madani, and I'm a Syrian tech and media entrepreneur and the founder of Arageek.com. So Arageek is a social publishing platform focused on creating high-quality articles and video content in Arabic language around technology, digital innovation, pop science for Arab millennials. So as a millennial who grew up in a generation age and also had the opportunity to live and study in the UK, and being exposed to Western digital culture, I started looking for content that really reflects what's happening in the world in Arabic language, and I couldn't find any. So I went to GoDaddy, I bought a domain, cheap hosting, and started publishing a few articles as an experiment. I got really good feedback, and the reaction was tremendous. So, oops, sorry. Okay. So, in the past 7 years since we started, we have grown to almost 3 million users consuming our content on a monthly basis, and now we are competing with regional media brands in the Arab world, as you can see, where we sit across a number of regional media brands. And we are a virtual team, by the way, so we don't have physical location. We are 10 people of content, articles, video, and social media editors. And so we use online communication tools like Slack, Trello, and Zoom. So in last year, Just last year, we witnessed a huge growth in our traffic and our users. So I decided to quit all my jobs and other projects that I was involved in. And now I'm ready to take the platform to the next level and seek maybe strategic investor who would be willing to capture the opportunity and help me to go further. Thank you.
And now, last but not least, John Jaeger, founder of Hala Systems, social enterprise, developing advanced solutions for civilian and asset protection accountability, the prevention of violence. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hala is a for-profit social enterprise that builds technology-driven solutions for the purposes of protecting people and things in pre, peri, and post-conflict environments. We aim to reduce harm, contribute to peace building and accountability efforts, and increase overall community stability. In Syria, our solutions have resulted in an estimated 20 to 30% reduction in casualties as a result of aerial bombardment in areas where our solutions are operating. At a high level, it works by receiving information from a multitude of credible sources, including human observers, remote sensing hardware, and open media. We then convert that information to structured data streams that are then further processed and analyzed by our proprietary software. And most importantly, that value-added and actionable information is then given back to the people who need it most in real time. In Syria, our solutions are deployed and administered in cooperation with local first responders and healthcare service providers. And we're currently reaching over 2 million people with potentially life-saving and localized warnings in advance of airstrikes. Looking forward, we seek to use the technology solutions we've developed to address further conflict-related challenges in Syria and beyond. Thank you.
Welcome back up here, John. Join the crowd. And now I'd like to open up to the floor again. We had a few people asking already from the previous panel. Open floor to ask anything of anyone.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, everyone. My name is Anas Al-Qassam. I'm a surgeon from Canada. I work with OSAM. I'm serving on the board of OSAM, Union of Medical Care and Relief Organizations in Canada. I'd like to thank Hilde, Malik, Helen, everyone who put this conference together. It's extremely important, actually. I know this is not going to resolve the crisis in Syria. The politicians, they have to resolve it, and it's easy solution if they want to. But as a healthcare provider, as a surgeon, I think putting the entrepreneurs together with the NGOs and even with the healthcare workers on the ground will optimize the utilization of the very limited resources we have, and will give hopefully the donors a little bit push so they can understand where their funds are going to go. Because in Awesome, we collected 200,000 data of 200,000 patients despite the war, despite the very heavy health airstrikes in the first few years of the war. And we're able to transfer this into digital platform. And now through some funds from EU and GIZ, thanks to them, we were able to transfer this experience to the healthcare sectors in Idlib on the ground. And so we can see now in a live way where the funds being deployed and what are the outcomes, even basic outcomes, but what are the outcomes of our healthcare services, not only just sending funds and providing healthcare services without seeing the outcomes. So I think it's extremely important. I'd like to thank you, and we're in Awesome and other organizations in the healthcare sector. We're very interested in working with you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. A very concrete offer, and also an important point about looking at data as an asset that can be used to do good things.
Hello. My name is David Munir Nabti, and I've been running entrepreneurship programs in Lebanon and the region for almost the last decade, and actually have worked with 3 of your esteemed guests on the panel as well. I think that the question that the gentleman brought up earlier around, are we basically playing around with tech while the serious business of politics is not getting addressed, is a very interesting one, and it opens up an entire sort of range of discussions about the massive amount of possibility that we're not leveraging because we're neglecting the role of technology and entrepreneurship, etc. So I have a theory about the link between entrepreneurship and peace, either conflict resolution or conflict prevention, which is if we disaggregate the causes of conflict. For example, in Syria, one of the driving causes was around rural economy, was around problems with water, etc. We disaggregate it down to these different things that contribute to instability, and then we direct massive entrepreneurial energy to address those challenges. Not imagining 6 of these, but what about 600 or 6,000? Or 600,000 entrepreneurs working to address these root causes of instability, of conflict, etc. And the limits of that are only the limits of our imagination. Now, if we think of how technology is getting leveraged to destabilize populations, destabilize communities, and right now, the driving forces that are leading technology and the impact that it has on all of us around the world is profit. It is venture capital. They talk about, in many of these leading innovation hubs, talk about disruptive technology and disrupting sectors, but not realizing that what is actually happening in much of the world is disrupting of lives and livelihoods. So if we can bring this energy, these 3 very powerful forces of technology, the entrepreneurial mindset and the entrepreneurial community, and seed capital and risk capital together, but according to the values that we want to build in Syria or in the region or the world, then these are unstoppable forces that will affect politics, will affect communities, will affect migration, climate change, whatever challenges that we think we're facing in this world now. And if we don't address them, will likely be getting worse in the coming years, the coming decades, as these destabilizing forces continue. Thank you.
Yep, I'll bring Hoda in a second, and I would, well, while she speaks, perhaps we heard a call for a voice here. Is there anybody from the Syrian business community or investment community in the room who would like to come in at some point as well? So let Hoda react quickly, and then if I may come back to you, sir.
Thanks, David. It's really excellent points you raised there. And it gets me on to 2 points I would like to comment on. I do believe, like you, that these efforts or collective efforts can be led by the private sector. I do also believe that public sector can play a complementary role and a significant role, especially in the early stages of developing these startups or these impact startups, more specifically. And we've seen that in the impact investing model. When I have worked, for example, with development finance institutions, we see the public sector's role is very critical at potentially de-risking investments for private investors. So maybe linking it to Rama's effort of trying to attract Syrian businessmen, I think it'd be very important to understand from them what are the obstacles that they see in investing in these early stage startups. I mean, the valley of death is called valley of death for a reason, because it's very high risk, and therefore there's a high risk of failure, and therefore loss of money for these investors. But with public sector or with public sector financing, that can actually help. There are a lot of mechanisms that are in place now that can help de-risk these investments and attract private investors at an acceptable risk return profile for them. So it's very important to build on what's already happening in the impact investing industry, whether at early stage or later stages of financing, because we need to also be mindful that the ecosystem is dynamic, so we need to evolve with the startups. The startups initially will need seed funding, Series A or subsequent early stage funding, but then at some point they will also need growth funding. And what we've seen in Lebanon and other countries in the region is that, especially for impact enterprises that really have a double or triple mission of achieving financial and impact or social returns, that they hit a ceiling and they're not able to access funding. So this is, again, I think, is a call for private investors to really look at the region, particularly in the Syrian entrepreneurs living in the region, or even other entrepreneurs who are looking to help Syrian refugees with their solutions.
The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, hi. I'm Sam Shams Pasha. I'm a Syrian businessman living in Europe. I think what we need to understand is that there is a lot of Syrian businessmen interested and willing to invest in all sorts of projects relating to Syrian and Syrians, whether be it in the diaspora or helping refugees or whatever. Of course, Syrian businessmen or any other businessman would look for a financial return on their investment, but not necessarily to the same level that you would invest in a normal commercial enterprise. There is an element, as Hoda was suggesting, about the social impact. I think the problem that we face is there is no mechanism to link us businessmen with the needs and the users that require such investment. And I think this is where the EU may be able to help by setting up these systems or channels which allow people like myself to seek, look for, and invest in such projects or entrepreneurs. I think we're missing that link, and I think that's what this panel perhaps can help achieve as a result of our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to the back of the room here.
نايف حجوب محامي سوري من
My name is Naif Hajoub. I am a Syrian lawyer, and I'm active in the Equal Citizenship initiative. I noticed that we have to deal with the idea of the digital perspective in Syria and entrepreneurship in Syria from a legal perspective. So in Syria, we are about to issue the digital crime law, and there were a lot of measures that were taken within the Syrian legal system to deal with this. And now we are trying to make people accountable, those who are not abiding by the digital crime law. So we would like to work with the entrepreneurs here to start study in order to look into what kind of loopholes are there in the digital crime law in Syria, because we want to create a safe haven in Syria for digital businesses. We want to have the correct legal environment that could encourage Syrians to return and to start digital businesses. On a personal level, I am representing my organization, and I hope that we could communicate and that we could receive suggestions from you with regard to looking at digital entrepreneurship in Syria from a legal perspective.
Shall I speak in English?
Yeah, English.
Okay. I'll try to answer it since I set up a few companies across the region in Syria. I think the way we should look at it, we need to be part of the digital world. We cannot change the world to be like us, which is something across the Middle East. We all want to create laws that we think will do something. The EU is quite advanced. The US is quite advanced in creating startup and attracting investors. We're now all over the place. We need to set up companies remotely where the founder starts the company somewhere and then work with Syrians across, maybe in Lebanon, in Jordan, or in any other country. But thinking about how can we make the world adapt to a law that happens in any country across the region. I can tell you fun stories about what governments are being very creative about to create new laws that limit people. But I think we're lucky that we can bridge that limitation, create a company, and then hire people in Syria without anyone interfering with us. I wouldn't encourage any work to do anything in Syria. I think it's going to be useless because we can't attract investors to work with our law. And at least that's my case.
I'd like to add that part of the vision that Malik had and the EIP for the lab is to try and address challenges in different sectors, among them the challenge in the legal framework. So hopefully that would be one of the issues that we can collaborate on.
Great. Can I suggest that we take a few questions now, because I think we're running to the end of the panel. So I will collect the remaining questions and reactions in the room, and then back to the panel for final remarks. Can I go over here to the right, please?
Hello, good morning. I'm Ibrahim Aqil from King Hussein Foundation, NGO in Jordan. My question is around how the digital entrepreneurship enablers are different from the traditional physical entrepreneurship projects. What are the main enablers for digital entrepreneurship from your experience, as you've all been into this venture? Thank you.
This is a conversation. Quick, 1 minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I commend you on your comment, David. I don't disagree. I work in an accountability organization. We have big data. We use artificial intelligence. We use technology. We documented evidence on war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the government and else parties in the conflict. I do not doubt the value of technology. But I don't think the Syrian conflict was never about economic reasons only. It's about good governance and bad governance. It's about government killed on its own people. We have problems with the government, with corruption, with lots of violations. Can you segregate your things and find solutions? Let's do that. We have constitutional committee being debated by the EU and by the UN to reform the constitution in Syria. Can we create a tool or app to help in that? Jumping on the original problem in Syria and discussing rosy scenarios is not going to solve problems in Syria, even if it's good ideas, and I love it, and I like it, and I support it, and I use it in my NGO. But it's not going to solve the misery of the Syrian people.
That sounds like a conversation that needs to continue way beyond this panel, I think, at the end. Can I have a couple more questions?
Can we answer that question?
You want to answer it right? I think, I'd like to, many people have waited. Can we start to the left, please, and then working our way in? You had the floor as well, I think, before. So can we pass perhaps to the gentleman next to you, if you don't mind? The gentleman in the... Yeah, because you haven't spoken yet, so...
Yeah. I'd like to echo the comments from the entrepreneur from Europe. I'm a physician entrepreneur. I've had many startups and really very anxious to do work in Syria. And the concern that I have is that transparency and that really being able to link to those organizations and have some accountability with that. I think I would be more than happy to be involved and participate if there is such platform that is available for people like us. We, again, not looking at return on investment and to the same extent that we would in any other kind of investments. Obviously, here there's a more value. So I appreciate your willingness to help us build that platform.
Great, thank you very much. I'm moving from the left and then into the center, please.
Thank you. I'm Shamsi Sarkis, the head of the Pax Syriana Foundation, which is an umbrella organization for Syrian civil society organization and projects. We are working currently on 2 digital projects. One is an application, internet-free application to provide vital information to IDPs in camps inside Syria. And another one is a safe networking platform to link Syrians outside and inside Syria to foster initiatives, whether commercial or non-commercial initiatives. So here is my question. What would be your advice for people like us coming from the CSO and NGO world to be able to meet the tech and innovation financial actors? And also, will there be a specific European instrument to fund social entrepreneurship projects for Syrian entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. Very concrete. Can I move then to the center, please? This gentleman.
Hi, my name is Thomas Stewart from the Mentor Initiative. We specialise in vector-borne disease control programmes in conflict and unstable settings. It's mainly a question for Hamim or anyone that can really contribute. We've been running leishmaniasis control campaigns in northern Syria for very many years now, and it was a disease close to eradication or elimination, but is now exploded because the sandfly vector loves rubble. Have you thought about turning your mapping or crowdsourcing of mapping activities to disease cases? Because we have a lot of problem controlling and planning where we implement our spray campaigns, because the lag time is often 6 to 9 months. So just a comment on whether the crowdsourcing of mapping activities can also be done with medical cases, or whether you consider that. Thanks.
Yeah, lady just in front.
My name is Rula Assad. I'm the head of the Syrian Journalists Network. What is lost here in this session is when you talk about entrepreneurship, you did not discuss the main digital rights for Syrians inside Syria, especially the people in the north, not even in the camps in the neighboring countries. So to base the discussion, it's not about only the relationship to how to solve the conflict in Syria and how to this is going to participate in helping Syrians outside and inside Syria, or to have to reach democracy and the transition to peace. However, the basic needs of the refugees in the camps, they don't have an access to the internet. All the expenses in relation to getting the tools is on the burden of the people, and it's not on the burden of the UN and the UNHCR, meaning that when you talk about leaping to talk about entrepreneurship without discussing the basic needs of the beneficiaries is a bit has a bit of a gap which needs to be bridged. If we are going to talk about the minimum level of how much people are going to benefit if we work together or coordinate it together in the first place. Thank you.
Yep. Gentleman behind. Okay. Go ahead there.
Zaki Lababidi.
Zaki Lababidi.
Advocating for freedom and democracy in Syria. My question is to Mr. Jan Yeager about asset protection. It's very important for Syrians now, especially living outside. Can you elaborate more on what is the mechanism to protect assets, and by that hopefully impede the Iranian ambition of demographic change in Syria that's happening under our eyes?
مرحبا محمد صالح علي مؤسس منظمة.
I'm founded an organization which works on the refugees and in Izmir. My question is as follows. The question is it possible to think about finding a way to stop this monopoly of some individuals or a small group of people when we talk about entrepreneurship, especially that this is now part of the culture of the Syrian society? And I mean here, since 1970 till today, we have this monopoly culture since Hafez Assad till today.
I think what I would propose now is that we start from one end of the panel to the other end of the panel for a final remark, and hoping that you will each in turn be able to pick up some of a question that has been asked. So may I start with John on one end and then run down, 1 to 2 minutes max.
Thank you. I actually think that the question related to asset protection should be answered by Tamim. I think that's actually a much more appropriate potential solution for the problem that you're describing. Just as a point of clarity, when I talk about protecting people and things, it's generally from protection from threats, whether those are threats that are violence-related or environmental. I just wanted to finish by saying thank you for being included in this incredible panel of entrepreneurs, and I hope that this isn't the end of the conversation. I hope that something continues beyond this, much much echoing, I think, several of the points that have been raised, that it's great to gather and talk, but real concrete mechanisms have to be established to matchmake between entrepreneurs and investors, public and both and private. So hopefully this extends outward from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. There is a lot of questions, which is the reason of this panel, just to raise up these questions, have this debate, have these discussions with all of us, just to come up with more of the solutions that we have. Just want to mention that here, despite the challenges that we've been facing, just to point out, you mentioned that of the challenges that refugees are facing in the camps. That's true. I studied the Zaatari refugees camps, and turns out the entrepreneurship rate is at 12.5, comparing to only 4.9 of the local Jordanian. So refugees within those challenges, not accessing to internet, not accessing to resources, not accessing to travel limitations, also without the camps, they become more entrepreneurial than the neighboring countries. With all of those challenges, we're seeing inspirational and innovational sense of actions that we need to support. We need to resolve those challenges. We need to have more of these conversations and more of this panel and more of these talks. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to comment on one of the questions from the gentleman there, I believe, who asked about accountability and transparency. And I do believe that with the use of technology and digitalization, actually, this definitely will be an asset in the sense that if you have quality data that you collect through the digital mechanisms, then actually that would help you hold yourself or others to accountability. When we look at public-private partnerships, for example, in many cases, the public sector's role or the public partner's role could be to hold the private sector, for example, the implementing private sector, to accountability by holding them accountable to their development impact as evidenced through data. And this is where technology plays a key role in doing this. I would add also that with impact investors or the specific type of investors who really do put impact either at par with financial returns or even higher, measuring this impact and therefore having access to quality data that demonstrates again the impact and the evidence, this would be a requirement that they would have in any of their investments. So that's really at the core of what impact investing is about.
So I'd like to address the challenge or what was the difference between digital and traditional entrepreneurship ecosystems. I think with the digital, there's an opportunity to leapfrog and get past this kind of infrastructure build one step at a time. And when we are doing online incubation programs, we're connecting some of the Syrian entrepreneurs that are in Turkey, some in Syria, and some of them in other countries, with the heart of Silicon Valley, where they're being given ideas that are just now launching. And they're looking at implementing them in an area where instead of going through the step-by-step till we catch up with a community that's 7 years ahead, they're able to catch up right away. So that's something different. And I think the investment also in the digital space is far less than that of the brick and mortar and traditional spaces. And with regards to the question of how do you meet these innovators, TechFugees is one example. It's a platform where it brings together a lot of the people solving for tech challenges with those in the ecosystem who can support them. There are hackathons for social good in every country in the world, and you'll find some Syrians in there. But hopefully this digital lab can also be a way to disseminate information.
Thank you very much.
The only thought that I have in my mind for Syrians who are outside Syria and who are fortunate enough to have access to better communities, the Arab world is quite a significant market that isn't really addressed. We could create solutions. We're intrinsically merchants. We can create solutions for the Arab world where we are. If you think about حسوب الاقتصادي السوق, we thought about the Arab world, and I think we can create plenty of solutions.
I'd like to comment on the gentleman's question there. I'd like to say that there are lots of initiatives that actually mapping all the area with diseases around the world. Unfortunately, they cannot get access to Syria because these organizations that they work for don't have access there. So the main issue is now to create the map. And then once the disease that you're talking about is located, it will give even the local help for them, a GPS or location to go there and help them.
I think the panel here covered pretty much all the questions, really, but I just wanted to make one comment. So I would say the entrepreneurship boom in the Middle East, in Jordan and in the United Arab Emirates and Egypt started in 2012 when the revolution and the crisis in Syria started. So many young Syrian entrepreneurs really missed out the opportunities to catch up with the rest of the region. So I believe, because we don't have a physical presence to all of us together and discuss challenges for entrepreneurs and opportunity. So probably this session, it's a sort of, I would say, but I would hope in the future something, a bigger event that can get people from pretty much everywhere and have a proper event to help us to catch up with the rest of the region.
Great, thank you very much. I think it is time to wrap up, but I think this has been a very, very interesting beginning of a conversation. I think it's brought home the point that we really need to get the tech companies, the investors, the government agents, civil society organizations talking directly to one another. I see the energy across the room. We do need a new approach. That's the disruptive, but also the subversive, in the positive sense of the words, the subversive quality of digital. I think we have plenty of ideas here for areas where we, as panelists, but also as the European Union, can help. The matchmaking side of things is obviously key. Getting the people together who have common interests and have common profit-making possibilities, perhaps even, is something that I know I was very interested in, and we're very interested in. So let's just say this is the beginning of a conversation. I thank you for taking such active part of it. Look forward to being part of it in the future. And would you join me in giving a hand to this great panel?
Right, that was interesting, as I was saying. Thank you all for coming. Just sort of quick response to Muhammad Abdullah, who's over there. By the way, we go way back. We're good friends, and I've known him for a long time. So your criticism is it's not personal, I know. No, I think that... sorry? Realism, right. But you also forget that the 2011 revolutions happened because of the digital space. So, yes, we're not saying that we're going to solve the Syrian crisis by setting up apps. At the same time, I think one of the biggest enemies for totalitarian regimes is the internet. And as we speak, just look at what's happening in Algeria. The course of Algerian politics has changed because people have been able to mobilize using the internet. So let's not sort of undermine digital space in terms of its ability to undermine the totalitarian regimes and give citizens a space for them to operate in, and civil society most importantly. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to end by mentioning that the UN Special Envoy for Syria has now got a Twitter account. So well done, Geir, for doing that. I think it's been long overdue. And we look forward to working with the UN in terms of developing their social media messaging through some of the research that we've done. Big thank you to the EU and the government of Germany, and of course to GIZ. Arzu and her colleagues have been tremendously helpful and encouraging. We look forward to the next Syria Digital Lab event with the generous support of our donors in the near future, we hope. And it's a conversation. Please follow us on Twitter. We have a website is now live, so you can send us and you can join our mailing list. Thank you very much again, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.